Think weeds are the real problem? They're not. Bare soil is. I'm going to show you 10 plants that cover the ground, crowd out weeds, and make your garden look better at the same time. So you can spend far less time pulling weeds by hand. Hi, I'm Samantha. I used to spend hours pulling weeds, only to see them return a week later. I tried mulch, weed membrane, and all sorts, but nothing really solved the problem. Then I realized the best way to reduce weeds was to stop leaving bare soil. Once I filled those gaps with the right plants, the weeds dropped dramatically, and the garden looked much better too. So today, we'll look at 10 plants that work like a living mulch, with choices for sun, shade, dry soil, and those awkward spaces beneath trees. Most garden soil contains what's known as a seed bank. Basically, it's a hidden collection of dormant seeds sitting beneath the surface. Some arrived recently, others may have been there for years, just waiting for the right conditions. Pulling out a weed removes that plant, which is useful, especially if you catch it before it produces seed. The problem begins when we repeatedly dig, rake, and disturb the whole area. Every time the soil is turned, buried seeds can be brought closer to the surface. Once they get light, warmth, and moisture, they can germinate. That's why a freshly cleared bed can look perfect for a few days, then suddenly develop a new green haze. You may not have done a poor job. You may simply have exposed the next batch of seeds. Even poppies often appear after ground that has been left alone is suddenly dug over. So pulling weeds isn't the problem. The trap is thinking that constantly disturbing the soil will solve everything on its own. Nature rarely leaves fertile soil empty for long. Where there's light, moisture, and open ground, something will grow. If the plants you want aren't filling that space, weeds will. A living mulch changes that. Dense foliage shades the ground, established roots occupy space, and fallen leaves add another layer of cover. These plants don't poison weeds, and they won't remove established brambles or bindweed. What they do is make the garden much less welcoming to new weed seedlings. The aim is to create layers of foliage that gradually meet without smothering the plants you want to keep. It's similar to no-dig gardening. Protect the soil, avoid disturbing it unnecessarily, and let roots and organic matter do more of the work. Right. Let's start with plants for sunny areas. 1. Point creeping phlox. Creeping phlox is ideal for sunny slopes, rockeries, retaining walls, and gaps beside stepping stones. In spring, it forms a dense carpet of pink, purple, lavender, or white flowers. Afterwards, the fine evergreen foliage remains as a neat mat that shades the soil and makes it harder for small weeds to establish. Give it plenty of light and free-draining soil. It spreads steadily rather than racing through the garden, so it gives useful coverage without needing constant control. 2. Low-growing sedum. For hot, dry ground, low-growing sedum is hard to beat. Its fleshy leaves store water, so it handles sandy soil, rocky areas, and strong sun. Creeping varieties gradually knit together between stones or along the front of a border. Once the plants meet, less light reaches the soil, which means fewer weed seeds can germinate. Avoid damp, heavy ground. Sedum would rather be slightly neglected than watered too often. 3. Catmint. Catmint forms soft, rounded mounds covered in lavender blue flowers. It works well along paths, around roses, or at the front of a sunny border. As the stems relax outwards, they cover the soil and soften the edges. It copes with poor soil, drought, and some partial shade, although it flowers best in full sun. Cut it back by about 1/3 after flowering, and it may bloom again. Give it room, because a healthy clump can become surprisingly wide. 4. Dahlias. Dahlias aren't creeping ground cover plants, but mature clumps become dense enough to make it difficult for weeds to grow through them. They tolerate sun or partial shade and cope with a wide range of soils. The clumps expand slowly, so they provide long-term coverage without spreading aggressively. You can divide crowded clumps every few years and use the extra plants elsewhere. One warning, dahlias are highly toxic to cats, so choose another plant if cats roam through your garden. 5. Lavender. Lavender doesn't travel across the soil, but several plants placed so their mature shapes meet can form a low, scented hedge. That dense foliage shades the soil and leaves less room for weeds. Lavender needs full sun, excellent drainage, and fairly lean soil. Too much feeding creates soft growth, while wet roots can kill it. Compact varieties work well beside paths. Plant according to their mature width, even if the young plants look widely spaced at first. 6. Yarrow. Yarrow copes with heat, drought, poor soil, and low fertility. Its feathery foliage fills gaps quickly, while the flat flower heads add color and attract pollinators. In lean soil, it usually spreads gradually and works well in an informal border or meadow-style planting. In rich soil, though, it can become aggressive, floppy, and harder to manage. Give it room to move, and don't overfeed it. Even useful ground cover still needs boundaries. Plants for shade and partial shade. 7-point hardy geranium. Hardy geraniums are different from the tender pelargoniums, often sold as geraniums in garden centers. Many varieties form broad clumps that spread across the soil like a flowering rug. They cope with sun or dappled shade, and some will even grow beneath shrubs and trees. Once established, their overlapping leaves make it harder for weed seedlings to get light. Plant them in groups of 3 or 5 for quicker coverage, and cut them back when they start looking tired to encourage fresh foliage. 8. Hostas. Hostas suppress weeds with their leaves rather than spreading roots. A mature hosta forms a wide dome of foliage that casts deep shade over the soil beneath it. Some stay compact, while others grow several feet across. They're ideal for shady borders, but they take time to reach full size, so mulch the gaps while they're young. They may also need protection from slugs in spring. Check the variety carefully because a miniature hosta and a giant one need very different amounts of space. 9. Astilbe. Astilbe suits moist, shaded borders where the soil doesn't dry out completely. Its fern-like foliage forms a substantial clump, followed by soft flower plumes in white, pink, red, lavender, or purple. It doesn't race across the garden, so think of it as a gap filler. Plant several together between hostas, shrubs, or other shade plants to close open spaces. Astilbe needs consistent moisture, so it isn't suitable for very dry shade beneath a large, thirsty tree. 10. Pot liriobook. Liriobook, sometimes called liliturf, is probably the closest thing on this list to a living weed membrane. It has dark, arching, grass-like leaves and small purple or white flower spikes. It can grow in deep shade, partial shade, and, in many gardens, full sun. It also copes with compacted soil, drought, and slopes. Once established, it forms a dense mat that crowds out many weeds and helps hold soil in place. Give it a defined space because it can spread into smaller, slower growing plants. How to plant a living mulch properly. Before planting, remove established perennial weeds first. Ground cover can prevent new seedlings, but it won't reliably defeat mature bindweed, couch grass, or brambles already growing through the bed. Next, match the plant to your conditions. Don't put astilbe in dry soil or lavender in damp shade, then wonder why the weeds are doing better. Check the mature width on the label. Space plants so their foliage will eventually meet, but don't crowd them together on planting day. While they establish, cover exposed soil with composted bark, leaf mold, or another organic mulch. Keep it away from crowns and stems, where trapped moisture can cause rot. Water properly during the first season. Drought-tolerant doesn't mean a newly planted root ball can survive without water. Then be patient. The first year is about establishing roots. During the second and third years, the plants begin closing the gaps and doing more of the weed control for you. 3 plants that could become your next problem before filling every empty space. There are 3 plants to treat with caution. The first is yarrow. In poor soil, it can behave well, but in rich soil, it may spread aggressively. The second is self-seeding alliums. They're attractive and easy to grow, but some varieties multiply so successfully that a small planting can become a large colony. The third is honeysuckle. It's excellent for covering walls and fences, but some types are extremely vigorous, and certain varieties can become invasive outside their native range. Always check the exact variety and its final size before planting. Fast coverage sounds brilliant until the plant ignores the boundary you had in mind. The difference between a useful ground cover and a weed often comes down to whether you still want it growing there. So rather than thinking of weeds as a problem on their own, look at the empty soil around them. For sunny, dry areas, try creeping phlox, sedum, catmint, daylilies, lavender, or yarrow. For shade, try hardy geraniums, hostas, astilbe, or liriope. You don't need all 10. Choose 2 or 3 that suit your garden, use them where weeds keep appearing, and give them time to create proper coverage. The occasional weed may still get through, but instead of repeatedly clearing the same patch of ground, you'll have flowers, texture, and living roots occupying that space for you. And that's the real goal. It isn't about creating a garden with no weeds at all. It's about filling your garden with so many plants you actually want that weeds have very little room left to grow. If you found this useful, subscribe for more practical gardening advice like this.